Hi, and welcome back to the Ninox Learning Channel. My name is Andy. I'm a Ninox programmer and trainer, and this is the second class in our 600 level solution series for the Ninox database system. In this series, we're looking at different ways to use the Ninox database environment to build entire solutions, where previously on the Learning Channel, we have looked at individual features and functions. In this 600 series, we're looking at solutions. We're looking at things we can do with Ninox that will enable us to be more efficient, more effective, both at work and at home in our professional and private lives. Any way you want to use Ninox, there's lots of things you can do to get more done or to spend less time and effort doing the things that you have to do every day. Now, this is an exciting class because we're looking at a new component in Ninox that is both a feature and a self-contained solution unto itself. With the most recent release of Ninox version 2.6, we see an entirely new type of view, a new asset called the pivot table, sometimes referred to as the cross-reference table. Now, this is not a table in the sense that we store data in fields and lay out data models. This is what we generically would call a business intelligence or reporting asset. It is a view of data that has been transformed and compiled into information. And we've been able to do this before by analyzing data against a single variable. But in this pivot table, sometimes called an XY table, we can now pivot around two variables as we analyze crucial pieces of information. Now, I want to look at how we've been doing this in the past so you can fully appreciate the revolutionary capabilities that this seventh new view brings to the Ninox world. For this class, we've built a very simple database. We have two tables, a customer table with about 24 customers in it, and an invoices table with about 400 or so invoices. Each invoice is associated with one customer. We have 8 salespeople in our fictitious organization, and we're going to look at all different kinds of ways to utilize the pivot or the cross-reference view to get even a heightened level of understanding to be able to make even better decisions faster using the Ninox toolset. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, I want to begin by just laying the groundwork when we talk about pivoting around a variable, or when we use the expression transforming data into information. What are we really talking about? Well, here we see a single variable pivot table. The variable is the sales rep. And as I said, we have 8 individual sales reps that work in this fictitious company. Each one of these representatives has a territory. They have customers within their territory, and we want to be able to analyze their performance according to various sales metrics. And this is just one. Here we see a sales metric. How many deals have they cut? The second metric, what is the sum total of sales on a salesperson by salesperson basis? We are pivoting around this single variable, the sales rep, while analyzing 2 pieces of information: the number of transactions and the sum total of all of those transactions. Another way we may look at our data is sales by month. Here we have each month of the year, number of transactions per month, sum total of all of those transactions. These are single variable pivot tables. We are pivoting or analyzing information around a single variable. Again, in this case, the information is how many transactions, the sum total sales of those transactions, pivoting around the single variable, in this case, month, in this case, salesperson. What happens, however, if we want one single table to pivot around both variables at the same time? Here I see sales by representative. Here I see sales by month. A pivot table or a cross-reference table would allow us to analyze the number of transactions and the sum total of those transactions on a month-by-month and salesperson-by-salesperson basis at the same time. This is the value of the pivot or the cross-reference table. Let's go in and let's just draw a quick view. We're going to call this our invoice listing. And we're not going to do any grouping. We're going to take the grouping mechanism off. And here we have the 400 records in our invoice table. Let's go ahead and have them, well, we already have them displayed in ascending order, so I'm going to go ahead and drag the invoice date over to here. These are two calculations, the month name and the month number. I'm going to get rid of those for right now because these calculations are only being executed for this particular view. I'm going to show you a better way and a critical way to do these calculations within the table to give your pivot or cross-reference tables some added oomph and capability. So we'll go ahead and hide those. And as we can see, this is the very basic data model. Invoice number and date, the total amount, the sales rep, and the customer. Those are the 5 fields that we see here. Now, I'm going to add one field for purposes of the pivot table we're about to draw. I'm going to go into administrative mode. I'm going to go into my data model or my table management window and create a formula. The formula is going to be called sales month, and the calculation is going to be the month, numeric speaking, the numeric month of the invoice date. Obviously, the numbers will range from 1 in January to 12 for December. We're operating on a calendar year. We'll go ahead and add that new field. This is a formula or calculated field, but a field nonetheless. So we're going to go ahead and show the sales month, and there we see it. Month 1 is all of our January transactions, February, March, April, all the way down to month 12, the month of December. So now that we have the two elements around which we want to pivot, the two variables, the name of the salesperson, and let's just put them right next to each other, the name of the salesperson and the month in which the sale was made. We want to understand how many transactions and the sum value of those transactions at the point where the salesperson and the month intersect or cross-reference each other. It sounds complicated. It couldn't be easier. Let's go ahead and build it. We're going to create a new view, and we're going to select the new option, Pivot. We're going to name this view Monthly Sales Summary by Sales Rep. Now, when I click OK, Ninox is going to create a view automatically. It's not going to mean a whole lot until we go in and actually lay out our data. So let's go ahead and do that. I am going to start by hiding all of the default fields that Ninox inserted into this view. We're going to start with a clean sheet of paper, and this is very important because the order, the sequence in which we set up the visible columns is going to be crucially important. The first thing we're going to do is identify the two variables around which we wish to pivot. The sales rep is one, and the sales month is the other. The next thing we want to define is the computed value, the data that we transform into information at the point of intersection. And that is going to be the invoice amount, specifically the sum total. What is the sum total at the point of intersection of our 8 salespeople and the 12 months of the year? It's that simple. Here is the sum invoice total for each salesperson on a month-by-month basis. The months January through December across the top, our salespeople named in the first column on the left. So for example, how much did Taylor sell in July? $2,592.11. We see that Dwight had a couple of bad months in March and September. Linda had a empty month in the 6th month, or the month of June. But here we see the ability where previously we could only look at one variable, total sales by sales rep, or total sales by month. This allows us to analyze our information while pivoting around or cross-referencing two variables at a time. Now, as I mentioned previously, the sequence or order of the elements, the components of the pivot or cross-reference table is crucial. Let's click on the name of our view, select Edit Columns, and take a look at this. We have first the sales rep, and we see our sales reps defined in a column on the leftmost side of our view. The second visible column or component is the sales month. This is the X, or the horizontal axis, across the top, and it ranges from 1 to 12, based on a calendar year, January through December. And then everything that follows those first two components is what we will see at the point of intersection, or the reference point where the two aforementioned variables cross. And in this case, it is the sum total of the invoice amount for that sales rep for that month. Keep in mind, the very first component will be what you see down the left-hand column. The second component will be what you see across the top row, or what we would call our column headings. This is our row headings: Joe, Amy, Calvin, Arthur, and all of our salespeople. This second component are the column headings, 1 through 12, January through December. Everything that follows is the information or the transformed data or calculated data that we see at the point of intersection of the row and the column. And there we have it. Now, I said that we could analyze a number of pieces of information around two different variables. Here we just see one. Now, I'm going to go in and relabel the one thing we see to be total sales. And instead of saying invoice amount, now we see total sales by sales rep for each of the 12 sales months of the year. But this is just the beginning. Now that we see that we can pivot around two variables, now let's add additional pieces of information. Here we see one piece of information, one piece of transformed data at the point of intersection of the month and the salesperson. Let's add another component. Again, in administrative mode, click on the Name tab for your pivot table and select Edit Columns. Remember what I said. The first object, or the first element or visible column, will be the column that appears on the leftmost side of your pivot view. The second object, in this case month, will be the row at the top that defines your column headings. Everything that follows is what you will see at the point of intersection of these first two objects. But you can have more than one thing. For example, here we see our total sales. Maybe we would like to see how many transactions or how many individual deals each salesperson did per month. Let's just grab the invoice number field. It doesn't matter which one. Just grab a field that's going to have content for every single record. Drag it over as a visible column, select it by clicking on it, and let's count how many records are in that point of intersection. And there we have it. We now see the total sales by month by salesperson and next to it, the number of sales by month by salesperson. The column heading, however, is not particularly accurate. Now, normally in Ninox, when we want to change a column heading, we simply click on it. That doesn't work in the pivot table. We have to go in and click on the tab name of the view and select Edit Columns. And here, we will simply title this Number of Transactions, or specifically Numbers of Sales Transactions. Now that looks pretty good. We have our total sales and number of sales for each of the 12 months, and we can scroll horizontally to get from January all the way over to December. We also can go down and see each of those pieces of information on a salesperson by salesperson basis. Two computations, two calculations using two variables, analyzing two different fields. This is normally a complicated asset to put together, but now in Ninox, it couldn't be easier. Simply click on the plus sign to create a new view, select Pivot Table as the type of view, and then go in and add in the components or objects or the visible columns for this view. Keeping in mind that order matters. The first object, that is the leftmost column. That is your first variable. The second object or visible column, that is the top row or your column headings. Everything that follows are the computed pieces of information, the values that you will see at the point of intersection. And you can add as many as you want. For example, I may want to know the total sales per month by salesperson, the number of sales for those same two variables. And I want to know one other thing. So I'm going to drag in a formula, and this formula is going to tell me their largest sale transaction of the month. And here's how we're going to do it. We've created this formula, and the formula is simply going to be the invoice amount. I'll click OK. And what I want to do is calculate or find the maximum invoice amount for each month for each salesperson. Click OK, and there we have it. Now I want to explain something. You will note, and I'm going to do this again, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. You will note that we've already used the sales total field. Remember this formula, this is the invoice amount field from our invoice record. We just renamed it total sales because that's the column heading. But we've already used that field. When you want to calculate multiple calculations or transformations on the same field, use a formula. As you can see, the option to pull over the invoice amount field, it's not here. We've already used it. To use it a second time, I dragged over a formula, and the formula is the field we want to use. In this case, the invoice amount field. Now I can apply the second calculation. In this case, it is an analysis of all of the invoice amounts on a month-by-month basis per salesperson, and the one value I want to see is the maximum, their biggest sale of the month. So that's how we did that. If we wanted to see the range over the course of each month, again, I go into Edit Columns. This formula will be their biggest sale. So how do you suppose we would calculate or find their smallest sale? We need a third calculation or transformation of the invoice amount field. Since we can only use the field once, again, we grab a formula. The formula is the field we want to use, and we apply the transformation or the calculation, in this case, the minimum value. Since the previous sale was the biggest, the previous field was the biggest sale, we should go ahead and call this one the smallest sale. And I'm going to change the order so it goes from smallest to largest, and there we go. In the month of January, we see total sales for each person, the number of sales transactions that each person had, and the range of that person's sales events for the month. In the month of January, Joe had a small invoice of 193 and a large, or his biggest invoice, was $464. I want to show you a couple of other things. I'm going to go back in and remove the smallest sale and the biggest sale. And in fact, I'm going to get rid of the number of sales transactions also, just to get us back to one piece of information at each point of intersection of the two variables around which we're pivoting. And what I want to show you is something that we've never seen before in Ninox. We know that we can take our cursor, place it on the crosshair or the divider between any two columns, click and drag it to the left or right to expand or contract the width of the column. This has always happened one column at a time. Now in the pivot table, we see a new application of this elasticity. I place my cursor between any two columns. I've selected the point between the third and the fourth month. I click, and now when I drag, all of my columns are getting bigger and smaller at the same time. So now we are guaranteed that all of our columns will not only be the proper width, they will be exactly the same width. So this is something we have not seen before. The pivot table is an excellent tool when you want to analyze something according to something else. Monthly sales by salesperson. Total hours worked by machinist by machine. Or total miles driven by month by driver. And if those drivers drove multiple trucks, we could add that. This ability to have multiple variables, two variables, and then pivot multiple pieces of information around those variables, tremendously powerful. You could do it before, but it would have taken a lot of code, and it would have really forced us to kind of override some general principles in the user interface design of Ninox. But with this new release, all of that headache goes away. We just need three fields. A field defining the left column, a field defining the top row, and at least one field, which is the computation, the information that we see at that intersection. I want to show you how to do one more thing using the pivot table that is one of the most popular applications of any financial database. Now, this specifically revolves around businesses using Ninox to understand their total sales, their total expenses, and their profit or loss on a monthly basis. I'm going to very quickly show you how to build such a pivot table. And we're going to do this, and again, we're still in administrative mode. We're going to do this by creating a new table just for purposes of this demonstration. And we're going to call this table Monthly Financial Results. I'm going to create one field, which is going to be the name of the month. I'm going to create a second field, which would be, in this case, the customer. I'm then going to create one more field, a numeric field, where we track our sales revenues. This number, we would track our operating expenses. And this formula would be the difference between the two. Sales revenue minus operating expenses. And we will call this our net result. Hopefully it's a positive number, which means it's a profit, but this is the difference between how much we sold or had coming in and how much we spent or had going out on a month-by-month basis. What we can do, having built this table, and obviously there would be calculations and formulas used to summarize all of the invoices, which is how we get our revenue, and to summarize all of our cash disbursements, which represents our expenses. The net result will calculate automatically. But once you've done that, you then can go into this table and create a pivot view. And this would be our monthly results summary, or a form of a very abbreviated, very high-level income statement, or P&L, profit and loss statement. And how would we build it? We'd go into Edit Columns, and we would, again, I'm going to start with a blank slate and build this one step at a time. We want to see all of our customers in the left-hand column. So we know that that has to be the first object or visible column in the pivot table. Across the top, each month. And at the point of intersection, the sum total of sales by customer by month, the sum total of our expenses by customer by month, and the sum total of the net result of sales minus expenses on a month-by-month, customer-by-customer basis. We go ahead and click OK, and there we have it. Our customers are listed down the left, our months are listed across the top, and I just set up some sample data, 3 months for 3 customers. And at each point of intersection, for each month, for each customer, we see our revenues, our expenses, and the difference between the two. Keep in mind, we can format or set the width of our columns all at one time by simply grabbing one column and dragging it left or right. So I'm going to push this out that way. And I'm going to do this one about like that. And that one there. Or I could have just done all of them at the same time by dragging the header across the top. I'll go ahead and do that. And here we see it. Now, all I would like to do at this point to finish this off is edit the names of the columns. This will be total sales. This will be total expenses. And this will be my profit, or if it's negative, the loss for the month. And that's all there is to it. Now we have a monthly summary of our total sales, our total expenses, and our profit or loss for the month on a customer-by-customer basis. We could have done this on a salesperson basis. We could have looked at different cities or states or regions or even countries where we do business on a month-by-month basis. We could look at different cities within one state. There's all kinds of ways to apply this cross-reference or pivot table capability. Just remember the most important thing in your setup. The first visible column or object is the first column. The second visible column or object is the first row. That's your column headings. And the calculations are everything else that follows. If you'd like to execute multiple calculations on the same field, simply drag over a formula. The formula is the field you want to use. In this case, I'll use sales revenues, and then apply the calculation. In this case, I want to know my average sales per month. And let's go ahead and name that average sales per month. Click OK, and there is that piece of information. I can skinny up my month, expense, and sales columns in order to make a little extra room for my average sales per month, and then do that so I am using my entire screen. And now we see total sales, total expenses, profit or loss per month, our average sales per month on a month-by-month, customer-by-customer basis. Any two variables can serve as the points of pivot, and you can have as many pieces of information at the intersection or the cross reference point of any two variables you select. It's simple, it's powerful, it's brand new in Ninox, and it's something you're definitely going to want to use in your Ninox solutions. That's it for our class today. That's pivot tables or cross-reference tables in Ninox. It's a whole new ballgame. It is a revolutionary change to the already incredible Ninox database system. Please come back and join us next week in our third edition of the Ninox Solution Series, where we're going to see how we can use Ninox to build an entire solution for our business, for our family, for our own personal use, for anything we want. Ninox makes it simple, Ninox makes it fun, and most importantly, Ninox makes it possible with very little effort. Thanks for joining me tonight. Thanks for coming to the Ninox Learning Channel. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you go out and build some great pivot tables. And I really hope I get to see you in our next class at the Ninox Learning Channel. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everybody.